Is the corn ready yet? No. The next day, is the corn ready yet? No. Is the corn ready yet? Finally, the white corn is ready to pick. I'm going to show you how to tell when it is ready and when it's not. I'm going to show you how to pick it, and then we're going to preserve it. I'm going to show you how to either can it or freeze it. So this is a very full video, and I hope it's going to be helpful for you. Hi, I'm Debbie, and welcome to my organic garden.
All I have needs, I have not provided.
When the ears of corn fill out, they just naturally pull away from the stalk because they're getting full down here at the bottom. Because everything is wanting to lean upwards, even the ears are wanting to lean upwards, and it's been a bit more difficult for me to determine. So what do? Well, I've been watching this particular ear to kind of be a judge of what the rest of the ears in this area is doing. So you just peel it away and you take a look. So this is a bicolor corn, just simply because I have yellow corn just across the walkway from the white corn. And you see how it's wanting to dry up? This ear is ready. That's about as full as it's going to get. And another way to tell, did you see how that spurt? I'll do another one. Now watch. Do you see how I can press into that before it bursts? That's going to be just maybe a day or two, even beyond when it was ready. So even experienced gardeners like me can wait just a little bit too long. Now look down here. Do you see how thick and full these are? These are never going to get any more full. So in comparison to the corn right across the way, this is an ear that is not quite ready. Though the top did not get pollinated, and that doesn't surprise me because of all the trouble with falling over, this corn can actually fill out a little bit more. So I'm not going to peel it back any further than this, and I'm going to cover it back up the best I can. When you peel it back, it does invite gnats and insects and ants to come along and start having a feast. Sometimes that's the only way that you can figure out if the corn is ready. You see here that it is leaning away a little bit, but I bet since we're going to have rain tonight, or the weatherman says we're going to have rain tonight, probably by tomorrow or the next day, that this ear here will be ready to pick. You can see here that there was a worm in here. I do go through and look for worms, but you know what? Most of the time they're gone. And I do have lots of little wrens that come around, and I don't know if they're the ones eating them, but something's eating the worms, and whatever it is, I'm glad. Ah, one went right in there. He's flying in around the corn. Kind of a wren, I think. There he is. See? He's really, really, really close to me. So now that I've opened this up further, I'm going to show you what it looks like. So you're going to take the corn, pull it down, and I usually wear gloves, and I just shuck it right out here in the corn patch. Now that's not a bad ear of corn. It could be filled out a little bit more. Don't take the stem off. Leave it on there. You'll thank me for giving you that tip. And I'll show you about that when it's time to clean these off. I like to have long sleeves, long pants, and gloves when I'm working out here in the garden. The corn just really irritates my skin a lot. So you're going to take your ear, pull it down and twist at the same time, and it will twist right off. Now this is technically white corn, but it has cross-pollinated with the corn right next door, and that's good. I like bicolored corn. Now you notice that the top has started to shrivel up. It's just been so dry, as I've mentioned before. So I just break that off. Do not break the stem end off. You'll see why in a little bit, but that's going to be a real big help if you've got the stem end to hold on to for the next couple of steps. So here's an example of an ear of corn that did not get pollinated well. So you see a lot of blank ones here. There's nothing you can do when it gets blown down time after time. But I won't throw that away. That will make a bite or two. Some are really, really good and full, and some has a little damage and not near as big. And that's typical in my garden. And I'm actually very happy to get any this year because the weather has been so weird. I'm going to set the chair to face my lawn because that corn juice gets all over everything, and I don't want it getting on my porch. So get yourself nice and comfy. This is why you keep the stem end. You're going to hold it. Whoops. Brush the hairs off with a stiff brush, and don't brush it so hard that you're actually piercing the kernels. You're just getting rid of the hairs that are still on there. Technically, it's called silk. And it's okay if you don't get all of it. There's still some that's in there that will come off when you cut into the corn as you're preparing to freeze it or can it. Don't take the stem off yet. You need that for when you're going to cut the corn off the cob. My husband is outside brushing off all the ears of corn, and I've got the kitchen ready. When you want to preserve your corn, you have to clear everything off your counters. That corn juice gets all over everything. So I moved everything to the table, and I have something over here in the corner that I think you're going to be interested in. That is a bug zapper. And I'm telling you what, it really does work. It's fairly inexpensive, and it's a way to get rid of flies, gnats, and mosquitoes in your home without having to use pesticide. And that means a lot to me. So I'm going to put the link in the description below. And I really appreciate your support if you'll check out my list of items, not only for the bug zapper, but for the containers I'm going to tell you about and other things that I talk about in my other videos. Well, now we're ready to get to work in the kitchen. I'm going to show you how to can some corn, but I'm going to save that for the yellow corn. If I'm going to have canned corn, I'd rather it be the yellow corn. I prefer frozen corn. It's easier for me, and it's just a preference. I enjoy the taste better. So I'm going to put the jars to the side for this part of the video, and for me, I'm going to harvest that yellow corn in another day or two, and that's when I'll show you how to can the corn. You are going to need jars that can withstand the pressure canning, and you're going to need lids. So I'll get into that in the next part of the video. There's different ways that you can store your frozen corn. I prefer these square containers. There's quarts and there's pints. I do not recommend that you freeze a quart at a time in these. And here's the reason why. Let me tell you a little story. Back when I was just first starting out with learning how to can and preserve, probably about 35 years ago, a friend of mine told me that a friend told her they found the easiest way to preserve corn. Just husk your corn, throw it into a pillowcase, and throw the whole pillowcase into the freezer. And you just pull out whatever you need, and it tastes just like fresh. I lost a bushel of corn for doing that. Corn has an enzyme. Enzymes are meant to break things down, namely food. If corn has an enzyme in it and you don't kill that enzyme, it is going to work even if it's frozen. It's going to start breaking down. So the reason why I don't recommend that you use a quart container is because after you get that corn boiling hot and you have killed the enzyme, then you've got to cool it off as fast as possible. And there's a lot of corn that can be packed into this 1 quart container. And you stand a chance that the center will not get cold and frozen fast enough. So if you have a larger family, just use more of the pints. It's really not that hard. Just have more pints in your freezer. I use these for soup and beans that have been cooked. Corn is just more picky than other vegetables. So I worked too hard to get that corn to this point. I don't want to cut corners. I'm not going to take that risk. So everything I tell you about freezing corn is going to be spot on how to freeze it, and it will stay frozen and fresh for a long, long time. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is this 13 by 9 pan. Any 13 by 9 pan will do, but you'll see when I start cutting this, the corn's going to fall down in here, and it keeps the corn from splattering as much over the counter. I am using this, I guess it's Pyrex, because it can go in the microwave. If you do not like to use microwaves, or maybe you don't have one, you can heat up your corn on the stovetop. The problem about heating up corn on the stovetop is it can scorch really quickly. And even if just a portion of that pot of corn is scorched, your whole pot is going to taste like scorched corn. So you don't run that risk when you're using the microwave. So let's get started. My corn has been rinsed, and I have separated the ones that are more yellow from the ones that are more white. And let's take a look at these ears here. Some people just really think that's gross, and it is gross, but you can still use this corn. You just got to cut around where the damage has been done by the worms. So to have only 4 ears of corn that shows some damage, out of all of those, I'm just very pleased because I do not use pesticides. I do walk through the corn, as I've shown you in another video, and I found a few, but those little wrens are the corn keepers this year, and I'm very thankful for them. It's really important to have a sharp knife, and that is why I have my sharpener nearby. And here is the reason why you leave the stem on. You use it to hold it. Run it all the way down. Now, isn't that cool? It just goes right into the pan underneath. Now, you can cut your corn as deep or as shallow as you want. You just don't want to get part of the cob in with your corn. Now, I turn my knife over to the dull side and I scrape all of that out from off the cob. Those cobs are going to go out there in the compost, or what I like to do is bury them back where they came from. Okay, hold your stem, cut straight down. I think my knife needs to be sharpened again. Turn your knife over, scrape all that out. That's called cream corn when you do that. Okay, I think that is about 1 pint of corn. I love my stoneware, but it is heavy. Here we go. All right. Depending on your microwave, this can take anywhere from 7 to 10 minutes. So I'm going to add a little bit of water to that, and I'm going to stick it in the microwave for 3 minutes, stir it, microwave for 3 more minutes on high, and then take a look at it. Give it a stir so that you can bring that inside the center to the outside. You want every kernel to be hot, and I mean hot. You'll see. It's got to get to the point that it's boiling. This is the 6-minute mark according to my microwave. This is what I'm looking for. You see how it's bubbling around the edges, but yet the center is not bubbling. So I'm going to put it back in there for at least another minute. I don't want to overcook it, but this is not quite ready. This is not hot enough. I'll show you what it looks like as soon as it is ready. This has been in my microwave a total of 8 minutes. And this is what you're looking for. Do you see how all those little bits have been boiled up to the surface? That means this was boiling inside the microwave, and that's what I'm looking for. So here is a pint container, and we are going to get that cooled off as quickly as possible. You can reuse your labels. Just do like I have and cross it off and write what's really in there. And this is Silver Queen corn. This is cold water. Make sure that this is sealed. It will most likely float. And we're going to cool it in this one first, and then I'll transfer it over to this sink in a minute. So you're going to cook it in the microwave for 3 or 4 minutes, give it a good stir, cook it again for 3 minutes or so, And then look at it. Every microwave is different. You know what I've showed you to look for that, what's on the surface, and it shows that it was boiling in the microwave. That's very, very important. Your microwave may not take as long as mine does. So why do I have two sinks? We have a well, and we live in Florida, so the well, the portion that holds the water above ground, the sun shines on it, and it's warm water. So what we get into our house is warm unless we completely run all the water out of that container, the well part, and get it running into our sinks. So that's why I have two separate sinks. That water gets heated up really fast. In fact, it's already warm enough I could probably take a bath in it. And this water is cool. So I've already changed that out, and I've got more cooking in the microwave right now. And you got to just cool it off the quickest and fastest way that you can, and that's what I do. If you live where you have spring water, or your well is cold, or maybe you have a refrigerator that gives you cold water, that's what I would recommend. You have at least one sink of cold water. So I'm going to move this over here, and I'm going to refresh this sink with cooler water, because I have probably at least 2 more pints coming. It's continuing to cook in the microwave. See what I mean when I say corn makes a mess and it gets everywhere? There's kernels all the way across right there. But there was nothing but counter. Okay, so 3, 6, 7 pints are ready for the freezer. I have cut corn in the bowl for tonight's dinner, and I still have a dozen ears for fresh eating, and also I'm going to freeze 8 of those. The corn is in the freezer, and I can't believe I'm showing you my freezer, but you see they're all in a single layer. When those are frozen solid, then I'll transfer it to my deep freeze. The counter has been cleaned, the sinks have been rinsed. That's a little hint. Rinse everything and wipe down everything as soon as you're done with the cutting part, because that corn makes great glue. So I saved back a dozen ears. I'm going to keep back some for fresh eating. And this is where you break off the stem and you put it in a Debbie Meyer bag. Have you ever heard of a Debbie Meyer bag? They're fantastic. They keep your vegetables for a long time, and they're reusable. And I like that because I reuse them until you literally can't reuse them anymore. And they really do work, and it cuts down on having to buy Ziplocs. I'm trying to figure out which ones I want to keep for fresh eating. I'm going to process 8 of these for the freezer. So now I have 4 for us to eat fresh. That's all there is to it. This can go right straight to the refrigerator. Be sure to look for it in the link below. So come on in closer. I'm going to show you how I'm going to prepare this corn for boiling water that's right over there on the stove. So what's the deal with a hammer? I've heard too many horror stories of people getting hurt with knives in the kitchen. So instead of pressing on it, I use a hammer. Lay the blade along the seam. And I realize that some corn isn't as neat as this, but just do your best. I'm going to lay that there, and I'm going to whack it just enough to the point that I know it started to go into the cob. I'm going to give it another whack. That's it. Now you can take the stem off. And this is ready for the pot that's already boiling. I'm going to put 4 in at a time. So, okay, set that timer. I'm going for 5 minutes because these are pretty thick ears of corn. And while the corn is boiling, I'm going to get another pot right here ready with ice water. This corn needs to be cooled down really, really, really quick, even more so than the cut corn. So I'm putting ice cubes in this pot of water, and that's where the cooked corn is going to go. Okay, it's been 5 minutes. Plunge it right into that ice water. Put this back on there. As soon as it comes to a boil, I'll put 4 more in there. Isn't that easy? Unfortunately, these do not fit in my reusable containers, so they're going to have to go in the Ziplocs. I could also wrap them in foil. If you double wrap them, they'll be fine. I just don't like the freezer burn. And you won't get freezer burn for a long time with the square containers. So let's get 4 more in that boiling pot of water. While that's boiling, I'm going to make another pot of cold water, transfer these into that pot, so it's a 2-step stage, just like I did with the sinks. That's really boiling. And while it's boiling, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. I hope it's been helpful. And if it has, give it a thumbs up, please. And be sure to subscribe. I garden year-round here in Florida, and I'm sure that there are other subjects that might be of interest to you as well. I really appreciate it. Well, I am almost done, and I have corn all over my shirt. Everything's been cleaned up. Did you hear that zap? That is another fly that just bit the dust. You need to check it out. Go to the link below. So let me show you what this is all about. I have the corn in here because I wanted to dry it off. You could dry it off with paper towels, but anytime I can dry salad or corn or anything with cloth, that's what I do. I don't like using paper or plastic when I don't have to. And I don't like having to use Ziploc. If I had freezer paper, I would double wrap this corn and use freezer paper, but I don't. So we're going to use Ziploc this time. So the corn was boiled for 5 minutes, put in a ice water bath, transferred to another ice water bath to make sure that it really got cooled off. And these are room temperature now, a little bit cool to the touch. And they are going to go right in the freezer, again, as a single layer. And I'm going to double bag these to help prevent freezer burn. See if I can get them all in there. All right. Now, if you've got the food saver bags, this would be a good time to use that. I do not know anything about them except that I've seen other people use them. Hold that back up in there. This keeps the freezer taste off. Anything that you have to keep in the freezer for a really long time. And now we've got 8 ears of corn to choose for dinner one night. It is a rainy day today, but I beat the rain this morning. I was out in the corn patch really early, and I was pleasantly surprised. I got about a bushel of corn. If you've come to this part of the video to learn how to can corn, I did some of this preparation in the part where you learn how to freeze corn. So go back to that part where I show you how to cut the corn off the cob. So let's take a look at what I got from all this yellow corn, and we're going to get this corn into these jars. My kitchen's really not conducive to videos from overhead, so here we are. I've washed the jars in scalding hot water, and they are ready to get the room temperature kernels in here. You don't need to have these hot right now because you're not putting hot food into the jars. I do recommend that you use pint jars. That just gives the pressure cooker enough time to get the corn heated all the way through, and that's really, really important. If you are just cutting the corn off and not creaming it like I show you in my demonstration, then you can put your corn in the quart jars. It just takes longer under pressure. The sources that I have looked at, including really old sources that I go by, they don't recommend you put the creamed corn into the quarts. Just use more pints. So I use the same rings over and over again. I will purchase new lids when I need to. It's not approved by the USDA, but if you're careful about taking the lids off your jars, then I'll just say what I do is I reuse them. Just make sure that there's no pieces missing off of this white liner here, and also no rust coming through. This is what I use. Some of the lids lately haven't been sealing good, so there is a way to check it and then check again later. So we'll go over that in a little bit. So let's get the corn into the jars. This is a funnel that's especially designed for canning, and I find it very, very handy. Now, because we're packing this fresh, you do want to leave some space here. So see, I'm not even quite to the rim here. We're going to be adding some boiling hot water and a little bit of salt, and we want to give the corn enough room to expand if it wants. If it doesn't expand all the way up, that's okay. If you fill it too full, then if it expands, it's going to leak out of your seal here, and it won't have a good seal. So just be careful not to overfill. Ta-da! I'm going to add about a half a teaspoon of salt per pint. You do not have to add salt. It's not essential. It has no bearing on how well your corn is going to can and get pressurized. And that is what's preserving your corn, not the salt. The salt is only for flavor. Now, you may have heard to only use plain salt, and that is what I have here today. I have used iodized salt, and I don't see any difference. I am pouring boiling hot water just to the bottom of the hip of that jar. Now, the straight jars, all right, so let me explain this. The smallmouth jars have a hip right here. Let's find one that I haven't filled with water yet. See, it's got a hip. I guess this is the waist. So you want to fill it up and leave at least an inch here. 1.25 inches is recommended for creamed corn. So I'm leaving a little extra space here. The idea is to not overfill, but you want there to be enough so that if the corn does want to take up some of that hot water and expand, you're not depriving it. You don't want dry corn. A little bit more there. Now I am using water that's been filtered through my Berkey filter. I have used straight from my faucet. I have a well. If you have water that has chlorine in it, I highly recommend that you use bottled water that does not have a chance of having chlorine in it. This is a really important step. You don't want there to be any corn or any corn starch along the rim of these jars. And if you want, you can use vinegar. I would use vinegar if I was canning something that had oil or grease in it, like meat. But right now, I'm using plain water and a paper towel. You can use a cloth. It works just fine. Just be sure that the rims are clean. That's what you're looking for. Now, I see a little kernel right there. I'm going to be sure that that's not on there. And I think that one needs a little bit more water. Checking them all. Now we just place the lids. In the old days, we used to boil the lids, but we don't have to anymore. I don't know what's changed, but it's not necessary. Just put them on there. Your rings go on top of that. Be sure they're seated right. Just finger tight, as you've probably heard that expression before. Okay, this one doesn't want to get seat on there right. There we go. And I need a small rim for that one. I'll have to find one. Okay, we got another stubborn one. Let's see. It's probably because this rim needs to be replaced. So out it goes. I want to show you what I see here. It's got rust down in there. So I'm not going to use it. It's just not wanting to seat on there good. Now, when you're buying your jars and your lids, they really need to be a brand that's made in the USA. They're just a better quality, and well, I take that back. This one was from Walmart during the pandemic. It says made in the USA. You know what? I lost some beams because of these kinds of lids. So I'm going to tell you, you got these lids, don't trust them. So this lid's apparently been used before, and it did seal the jar that this came out of, but I'm not going to trust it to do it again. So all the rest of these are by Ball. I don't want to lose any of this because I was careless about what kind of lids I bought. This was too hard to come by. It took a lot of effort to grow it. It's taken me effort of working in this kitchen this morning, and 2 beds, which is 4 rows of corn, which is 80 feet of row. So 80 feet of corn, and this is all I got. I got about a bushel. I don't want to lose any of this. So I am going to be very, very careful how I preserve it. So my canner can fit 8 pints or 7 quarts. So I've set them all down in there, and I'm going to add water to about halfway up the jars. So the inside of your pressure cooker is going to have a rubber gasket. So you get that seated in there really good. And then you're going to have to line up this arrow with that arrow before it will sit down on there. See there? And then you close it. This is an old Presto canner that I've had for decades. I prefer to have the weighted pressure regulator. This is a 5-pound ring here. You add a ring and make it 10 pounds of pressure. And there's another ring that you can add to make it 15 pounds of pressure. I prefer this kind of jiggler as opposed to some of the canners. Most of the canners that you see nowadays have a little pressure gauge here. I like the weight because I'm listening. If you're a mama, you've learned to listen to things. And once this gets to jiggling, I'm keeping track of it just by listening. I'm not having to run in here and look and see, is it at the correct pressure? Because this is going to keep this regulated to 10 pounds of pressure. As long as it's jiggling 3 times, 4 times a minute, it is at 10 pounds of pressure. I have a link to that kind of a pressure cooker in the description below. I'm going to keep an ear out, and we'll come back as soon as this little guy starts to jiggle, and I'll explain the difference between this little guy and the regulator. Well, I almost forgot to put the vinegar in. It's no big deal if you forget. But what vinegar does is it keeps the hard water deposits from building up on your jars. And I'm using cleaning vinegar. It's not going to get in my food. And it only takes, I don't know, 2 or 3 tablespoons in the whole canner. You don't need a lot. Let's get that seated on there, matching up the arrows. And let's get the weight on there. Do you hear that? This is a little vent, and it will stop bubbling around in a few minutes. You don't start counting yet. This is what you're waiting to listen for. Do you see how the little vent is now up? It's building up pressure inside, and soon the jiggler will be jiggling. Now it's jiggling. And now is when you set your timer. That'll be 75 minutes. For the kind of corn I cut, I think that is going to be a good amount of time. So you see it's dancing around pretty good right now. So I'm going to turn this down and keep an ear out. If that level of heat doesn't keep it jiggling around at least a couple of times a minute, then I've got to come back in here and adjust the heat. So we'll see you in over an hour. The timer has gone off, and all we do at this point is pull that pot off the heat or just simply turn the burner off. And you want it to cool down naturally. And that's going to take another hour and a half, maybe 2. So we'll come back in a couple of hours. Okay, it's been an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. I lost track of time. But I'm hearing them ping in there already, and that means they are sealing. So let's get them out of the canner, and you can take a look at what they look like now. Do you see this weight? It's going right back to the knife drawer. And I know that's where it's going to be the next time I need it. Pick a place for you to store it. You'll be glad you put it right back there. It will not leave my hands. It's either in the drawer or right there. Okay, you're going to need a jar lifter because these are still pretty hot. Looks pretty good. See, they're still boiling in there, and that's a good sign. I'm going to let those sit for a couple more hours, and then I'll show you how I test to see if the seals really did seal. When I took these out of the canner, most of them had already sealed. I could hear them popping inside the canner, and that little pop is a canner's delight. One had not popped yet, so what I did, I don't know if the camera can pick it up or not, but there's almost like a little button right there. Oh, see? Okay, this one's showing it right here. Can you see that? If it hasn't sealed, that's actually concave instead of convex. Does that make sense? In other words, it's still bulging out instead of pressed in. So I am going to set this one to the side, and I'm going to keep it out on the counter and check it every day or 2. And if I still have a question about whether it's really sealed or not, well, you better get it in the refrigerator. If that seal does not go down, go ahead and get it in the refrigerator and use it within the next couple of days. Don't wait. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. I hope it was helpful. You learned how to tell when your corn is ready, how to pick it, husk it, get the silks off, cut it off the cob, or leave it on the cob. You're going to either freeze it or can it.
Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto